All right, have you ever really stopped to think about how all the stuff you own actually got to you? Today, we're diving into the incredible, kind of mind-bending engine that moves our world, international trade. It's this massive system that touches literally everything, usually in ways we don't even see. So let's get into it.
I mean, seriously, think about it. The cotton in your shirt, where did that come from? The parts inside the phone in your hand, who put all those together? It's a safe bet that most of those things have traveled way farther this year than you have.
And that's because they are the final product of this huge interconnected web of trade and finance. This isn't just about shipping boxes from one place to another. It's more like a global dance of economics, politics, and technology that delivers the entire world right to your doorstep.
So, why? Why do countries even trade in the first place? Why not just make everything you need right at home? Well, to get to the why, we first have to look at the core economic theory. Let's call it the ideal world scenario.
Okay, the big idea here is something called comparative advantage. Now that sounds super academic, but the concept is actually pretty simple. It means that even if one country could make everything better than anyone else, it still makes sense for it to just focus on what it's most efficient at. It's like a world-class chef. Sure, they could probably wash dishes faster than the dishwasher, but their time is way better spent actually cooking. The result? Everybody produces more, and everybody benefits.
And this chart, wow, it makes the theory perfectly clear. Let's look at this hypothetical. So, with no trade, the world makes 58 million meters of silk and 18 million PCs. Fine. But now, watch what happens when India goes all in on silk and the US goes all in on PCs. The total output just jumps. We get more silk and more PCs. This is the definition of a win-win, where specializing actually creates more for everyone involved.
It seems so simple, doesn't it? So neat and tidy. But that leads us to the million-dollar question. If the theory is so perfect, why is the reality of international trade so messy, so complicated?
Right, because the real world is not a textbook. There's a whole bunch of different forces that are constantly pushing and pulling on how goods move around the globe. The first set of forces we need to talk about are purely economic. Let's start with inflation and national income.
So picture a country where prices are just rising like crazy. That's high inflation. All of a sudden, its own stuff starts to look really expensive compared to goods from other countries. So what do its people do? They start buying more from overseas. Imports go way up. And at the same time, the rest of the world looks at that country's products and says, no thanks, too pricey. So its exports go down. It's kind of a double whammy for that country's trade balance.
The second economic force is national income. And this one's pretty intuitive, right? As a whole country gets richer, its people just have more money to spend. And what do we do when we have more money? We buy more stuff. And a lot of that stuff is imported from other countries. So a richer nation almost always becomes a bigger importer.
But it's not just these invisible economic forces pushing things around. Oh no. Governments are very, very visible players in this game. They often jump in to change the rules, usually to try and protect their own industries. And that brings us to the world of policy and protectionism.
And believe me, they have a whole toolkit to make it happen. These are just some of the most common tools they use. You've got straightforward things like taxes or tariffs, but then you have more sneaky things like bureaucratic hurdles. Every single one is designed to control what flows across a country's borders.
Let's start with the most famous one of all, a tariff. It's really just a tax you put on a good that's being imported. The whole point is to make that foreign product more expensive, which hopefully gives a price advantage to the local guys. And this example just perfectly illustrates the central tension here. That $10 tariff, it might help the local shoe factory stay in business, which is obviously great for its workers, but for you, the person buying the shoes, it just means you're paying more. So you can see tariffs are almost always pro-producer, but they're also anti-consumer. Now, these restrictions aren't always so obvious. Take the so-called voluntary export restraint. This is a really clever piece of political footwork. Back in the 80s, the US government asked Japan to please limit its car exports. Japan agreed. But that word voluntary is doing a lot of work there. They probably only did it to avoid getting hit with even tougher official tariffs. It's a way to control imports without looking like you're putting up a big wall.
Okay, time for our final major factor, and this one's a biggie that's always in motion, the currency seesaw. The value of a country's money can completely flip the script for its importers and exporters, sometimes overnight.
The exchange rate is just the price of one currency in terms of another. Simple enough.
But because that price is constantly fluctuating all day, every day, it creates a massive amount of both risk and opportunity in international trade.
Let's make this super real with an example. So, a Canadian importer wants to buy a tennis racket from the US. The racket costs $100. In scenario 1, the Canadian dollar is pretty strong, so the racket costs them 125 Canadian dollars. Okay, but now look at scenario 2. The Canadian dollar gets weaker. The racket still costs $100, but now the importer has to pay 143 Canadian dollars for it. That is a huge price jump, and nothing changed except the exchange rate.
Okay, so we've gone through economic forces, government policies, and swinging currency values. But why does any of this really matter to you? Let's bring it all home and connect these huge, global flows directly to your life and your wallet.
Well, the price you pay for that phone or those shoes, that's directly affected by tariffs and exchange rates. The number of choices you have when you're buying a car or groceries, that can be limited by quotas. The health of local companies, and maybe even your own job security, is impacted by things like subsidies. You see, all these factors we talked about don't just happen in some far-off boardroom. They actively shape our economic reality every single day.
So it turns out international trade isn't just that simple, clean theory of everyone winning. It's a really complex dance between economic forces, government interference, and currency chaos. The beautiful idea of free trade promises us a world of bridges connecting everyone for mutual gain. But the reality is often a constant tug-of-war with walls of protectionism going up. And as we all try to navigate this interconnected world, the big question we're left with is this: are we building more bridges, or are we building more walls?